Hey everyone, welcome back to Blurred Box. I'm Chloe.
I'm Pooja.
I'm Sophie.
And I'm Andrew.
And last episode, we had the pleasure of speaking with Shivek Narang and learning a bit about the teen brain and mental health awareness.
Today we have Anthony Rebello, Executive Director of the World Awareness Association. Welcome, Anthony. Could you give a little bit of an introduction on yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Anthony. I'm a junior from North Carolina. I'm the Executive Director of World Awareness Association, and I enjoy rock climbing in my free time.
Awesome. So, as we mentioned, you're the Executive Director of the World Awareness Association. So what was your inspiration behind that? I know you're also really into advocacy, activism, and social work. So how did that all kind of come together, and how did you get inspired to do that?
So ever since I was young, I would always travel with my family to different countries, India, Oman, Spain, France, Italy. So I had a lot of experiences in different countries with, different cultures and lifestyles. And as I got older and, started paying more attention to, how people lived and the experiences that they were given, it kind of hit me that, I'm very lucky to live in the States and, be able to enjoy everything that I have. And a lot of people don't have the same opportunities that I do. The more I started looking into it, I realized that not only is there not a lot of information out there about, different cultures and different lifestyles that's available, especially to teenagers, but that nothing was really appealing to my age group. And so having a way for, teenagers and young adults to learn about something that they're interested in and then figure out how to get involved was kind of just, my vision for the organization. And it's just been a way that I and other people as well can share their passion for activism and advocacy in a wide range of topics.
Yeah, your journey is really inspiring, and honestly, I think what you guys are doing is pretty awesome. I know a large part of your organization is focused on blog posts, so I was just wondering, blogs and writing and literature, like how do you think that impacts awareness, and what do you think the importance of it throughout?
So I think we try and focus more on content. So we have an editing team, but we open up our posts to pretty much any teenager and young adult that wants to write about something, just because it's not fair to limit it based on writing ability. And so having it as a blog just allows us to translate it to other languages. Like I said, you have people in other countries like France and Spain and Germany and Italy that speak other languages, but still deserve to have the same opportunities to learn and get involved as Americans and English-speaking individuals do. And so, yeah, we focus on our blog and our social media, Instagram and Facebook mostly. And because of that, we get to appeal to a different language than most like normal news organizations do, like on TV and magazines and newspapers. I watch the news, but because my parents do, not usually by choice. And so we try and make it to where teenagers and people that are on their computers and their phones can access information that they want to know about in a laid back and fun to read kind of way.
Yeah, and in that vein, I'm just going to chime in for a second. I know I've spent a little bit of time on your website, and I know a lot of the issues that you talk about, from like LGBTQ rights to indigenous rights, those are, I would say, some pretty complicated, or at least have nuanced different sections to those issues. And so I was just wondering, because for me, I know it took me a while to sort of discover an interest and passion for humanitarian issues. So I was wondering, when you guys are writing or working on your blog, do you make a conscious effort to try to simplify it to engage more teenagers if that's your target audience?
We do actually, and as I mentioned, our entire team is teenagers. we have a senior and she's 17, but everyone else is younger. And so obviously, a lot of us come from Stanford, the high school, but some of us don't. And so, we all come from different backgrounds with different writing class experiences. And so we try and write informationally, but also in a way that anyone can understand, even adults, and so, yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. I love what you're doing as well. And I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on your work in indigenous rights and kind of your thoughts on that. Yeah, because it's just something that's interesting to all of us. I know we were discussing that before coming on.
So pretty much there's not a lot of information. Well, there's plenty of information, but there's not a lot of like public knowledge about not only the lifestyle of Native Americans and indigenous individuals, but also of the rights that they're afforded, because yes, they live in the United States, but they aren't always treated the same. And, I'm sure all of us know the past that they've had to endure for hundreds of years, and so, for example, the page that we have, it lists some of their rights, so protection from discrimination and the right to social services, but also things like they're allowed to control their land. So land that is given to them and is designated their land, they get to do what they want with it. And an issue that I'm seeing more and more of, especially in recent years, is you have a lot of individuals and government officials and the leadership of our country in particular that wants to take away land for mining or oil or farming or whatever it be, even though technically that's not only is it not technically allowed, but it's not right in any way, because not only have we taken the whole country, but we're continuing to infringe on their ability to live the lifestyle that they have for hundreds of years. And so even when you see an article that says land taken from Native Americans for oil drilling, the focus isn't really on the indigenous people in those areas. It's more on what they're going to do with the oil, or how they're going to get oil from there, where it's going to go. And so I think it's important to realize that even though it's talked about, it's never really expanded on. And there are certainly people out there that don't know about it or do know about it and want to get involved. And so that's kind of why we have that page.
Yeah, that's really cool because, like Pooja was saying, all of these topics that are on your website, they're also very, supposedly you can call them mainstream, right? From,
Right.
LGBTQ plus to climate impact, very famous from Greta Thunberg. All of these, and then you have indigenous rights. It's really cool because, your whole goal of your website is to educate teenagers mainly, right? And also any other audience. And by educating them, right, you're saying that you want to kind of cultivate this awareness in them from that. And then from that awareness as well, you want to cultivate the understanding. But then from the understanding and being able to know about this stuff, then comes the action, right? So what in particular can people do to, I guess, put activism towards that particular topic? Or is there anything that you and your team particularly have in mind in terms of doing that?
So it's kind of a difficult topic, and we're nonpartisan, so we won't say for one way or another, vote for him, vote for her. And so that kind of, it limits us as to what we can say, because, a lot of it is political, unfortunately, even though activism a lot of the time shouldn't be, because the stuff that we're discussing and trying to change isn't a, right versus left thing. It's a lot of time it's a crisis. Things need to change. And, for example, the indigenous rights, it's like I said, it's a difficult concept because for years we've asserted our dominance over them. And so it's not as easy as just, emailing your representative or sending a letter, because it's a constant battle. You may stop them from taking land A, but they may already have plans to take land B, and so I always feel that, emailing your representatives, calling if you can. I'm a fan of filling out petitions. There's a lot of controversy as to how effective that actually is, but I feel for putting your name and email address down, it can't really get much better than that, right? I mean, I know for sure, if nothing else, and this is a point that I always make when someone, complains about how effective it is, if nothing else, you're still raising awareness. I mean, when you have a petition that has 1 million plus signatures, that's definitely getting a lot of attention. You're going to be sending that to friends. You're going to be sending that to family. It's going to show up on Instagram and other social media platforms. And so I think really my goal through the organization, if nothing else, even if you can't specifically do something, is awareness does make a difference. It may not be in 5 years, it may not be in 10 years, but at some point, this is going to be, the majority of the population, our generation. And if we are all aware of a particular issue, when we're the ones that can actually make that difference, it's going to be easier for us to get involved. So
I completely agree with that goal, to be honest. I'm a big advocate for education because I feel like awareness and education is what's going to change the upcoming generations. And unfortunately, just with our current generations, I just feel like they were kind of stagnant when it comes to change. So I like that your premise is bringing awareness. And I also like that you said that you're nonpartisan, because I feel like even if you have strong values on either end, just being exposed to both sides of the story will give you more knowledge in your area and also like spark a conversation with the other side, because I think that's what really brings change. So I really like your whole organization by students for students, and I'm just really happy that there's organizations like you out there. So
yeah, definitely. And also kind of to touch on the indigenous rights, I think it's really important that you guys are touching on that, especially because, as you said, if the indigenous populations are being pushed out, they're also having nowhere else to go. And then at that point, they're having to assimilate into a community or a culture that they're not actually supposed to or want to be assimilated into. And I think that's been a huge problem in US history too. I remember learning about that last year, and I found that like pretty new to me. I hadn't really been exposed to that. And so I think it's really great that you guys are touching upon that, because everybody has a right to retain and maintain their own culture without having to be pushed into the same mold as everybody else. And I think that's also why a lot of indigenous populations are dying out. So I think that's really awesome that you guys are touching on that and emphasizing that in your association.
Yeah, I don't mean to backtrack, but I found something that you said really interesting, Anthony. And also because like Sophie was talking about this too. Something that is very difficult in the humanitarian activism advocacy realm is like what you said, being like everything is very political. That's so like such a big part of everything, right? Everything right now from business and a lot of the advocacy world is political, like you said. Personally, being on social media or wherever it is, I have definitely encountered struggle in terms of being politically neutral, or like, I don't want to say like politically correct, but like, you know, trying to keep it as far away from politics as possible, such that that's actually like an interesting concept, because like, why are we staying away from that? Why are we trying to stay politically neutral? Like, could you talk a bit about that? Because I'm very intrigued to hear like how you guys actually navigate that, because different people have different ways of doing so. And why?
So I'll start with the why, and then I'll delve into the how. So why, kind of like you guys said, it helps us appeal to a wider audience. You know, if we're on one side of the spectrum, mostly you're not going to have someone from the other side that's interested in reading. You know, they're going to read one article, see that it's right-leaning or left-leaning, and then just immediately leave and not come back, you know, which we want to encourage people to return and continue to find information and resources that allow them to get involved. And so in terms of the how, we obviously we're not going to endorse anyone. We're not going to say, vote for him if you support climate change, or if you support fighting climate change, or don't vote for this person because of this, and so it is difficult. But to this point, we haven't really run into any issues. And I haven't had this conversation with my authors other than just saying, you're not allowed to write anything politically. And, like you said, that's a very hard thing to do. Luckily, the topics that we're covering, such as climate change and Black Lives Matter, although they're becoming more of a political issue, the information that comes at the root of these problems doesn't have to be taken in a political manner. I can say that there's racial inequality or bias in policing from a non-political standpoint, because there are facts and statistics that support that. I can say that climate change is getting worse because there are studies and statistics that show that. And that's not a political statement, even if some take it to be one. And so, like you said, social media has made a lot of this worse, and people, argue and complain and say, oh, this is bad, this is good. And I think, as teenagers, like I said, like you guys said, we're the next generation. It's going to be on us to make the change that we need to. And so I personally, as hard as it is, I try not to respond to Instagram comments. I follow the change without the A Instagram page. And I always read the comments partially for entertainment, and also because I like seeing what people have to say. Because if I see a comment that I don't agree with, I'm going to go and do research so I can make sure I have the right viewpoint on that. And not that there's necessarily a right versus wrong, but that so I can understand and make sure that I have the right information on that topic. Because, I don't want to go out and tell my mom or my dad or my brother, this happened, and that be the wrong information. And that's kind of our whole goal, is that we provide true, credible information, from a wide range of sources. And we always cite our sources. Usually it's just a link down at the bottom of the article. But I personally, I try to stay away, from CNN and Fox News. But, if I have to, because sometimes you can't find a lot of information on a topic, and so I try and always supplement that with another page or official government or like a college study information. But, I know that's kind of getting off track, but it's a difficult concept to stay nonpartisan when a lot of the issues that are facing humanity are becoming political issues. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge that not everything needs to be political, because, saving lives and saving, the earth is not a right versus wrong thing. It's either you do it or you don't. And I would think that one of them is the obvious right choice.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Oh wait, Andrew, I think wanted to also say something. I'll let him go.
Yeah, so I know we're probably about to transition into talking a little bit more about like the current events with Black Lives Matter, but before we get into that, I just wanted to ask, because I know generally on this show we've hosted more like one issue focused groups, but I'm just curious, as someone who's running an organization which sort of focuses on a broad variety of issues, how do you feel about focusing on sort of like what's the most in the moment, like current going on issues, versus like sort of pounding the same drum? Like indigenous rights isn't something that I would say like is super like something
Correct.
new and different is happening now. So I'm just curious what you guys do about that.
So at this time we have about half a dozen authors. A couple of us are pretty consistent with writing. And so it kind of ends up being that we have a list of, I think, like 12 to 20 topics that we want to write about. And I have scheduled posts for, I think, like a week and a half now. And so like I've written them and they're scheduled to automatically post for a week and a half now. And so the problem is writing about current events, the information isn't always known. You know, there are things like the wildfires in California and Oregon and Washington that, yeah, they're current and they're important, but everyone also knows about them. You know, I mean, you look at anywhere, you know, the news, social media, a magazine, and you're going to see it. And so personally, I'm not in a hurry to say, you know, there's wildfires. I would be more interested in saying the wildfires are caused, you know, by the gender reveal party or this, and then say, you know, how people can get involved to, you know, keep that from happening, not necessarily just not having gender reveal parties, but by, you know, the solutions to the climate change that's making these fires worse. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but it's not the current events that we write about. It's difficult because the information is always changing if it's a current event. And so a lot of times we'll put something at the beginning that says we'll update it, or, you know, this was written on. And so we acknowledge that the information isn't going to be accurate a week from now. But yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said about how you read through the comments and you try to educate yourself before giving a response, because you want to give the correct, not the correct, I guess the most educated response that you can give. And one of the statements on your most recent blog about Black Lives Matter really resonated with all of us, and it was, "I don't see color." So could you explain what that statement means and kind of why that's probably not the best statement to use, the impacts of that statement?
So I'm not going to stand up for the people that say it, but I understand why it can appear to be a good thing to say. You know, I don't see color. You know, you're saying supposedly that you don't see a difference between people of color and ethnically white individuals. And so, you know, I acknowledge how that can seem like a good thing to say. But I'm here to say that that is absolutely probably one of the worst things that you could say, because it appears to be a good thing, but in reality, it is mostly going to be taken as a racist statement. And, you know, you're basically saying that you are choosing to ignore the struggles that people of color are going through. And, you know, whether or not you're doing that on purpose is pointless. You know, that really doesn't make a difference, because you're acknowledging that you don't see color, and that it's not a fair thing to say to make you seem like a better person, because, you know, saying that you don't see color is not the same as saying all races should be equal, you know, because they're obviously not, and there are obviously issues that we're still experiencing. And so I think that to say that, and alongside the other ones I had were things like, you know, white privilege doesn't exist, and, you know, you don't sound black, which, you know, I hate saying those things, you know, because even though I'm saying them in the context of explaining why they're bad, you know, it's, you know, I don't understand how someone could say that and not understand how it can come across as derogatory or offensive. But, you know, that's not for me to judge, and that's kind of part of my organization. And I hope in a way that it can grow is that it's not anyone's job to say what someone else can or cannot feel. You know, I can't tell indigenous people in the United States, oh, we're perfectly legally taking your land, so what? You know, I mean, I don't care, but I do care. You know, it's my job and it's our job to make sure that we preserve their culture and preserve their lifestyle. And I got off the page, but on the website, the Indigenous Rights page, it has a bunch of statistics, and one of them was from the late 1800s to I think the mid 1900s. I believe there were over 100 million acres that were taken from Native American like preservations, and I could be wrong on that number, so don't quote me on that. But you know, you always have to look at things, and it goes back to how over time statistics and information changes. You never really know, you know, and so if you're unsure about saying something like "I don't see color," or, you don't sound Black or Asian. If you're not sure, don't say it, right? It's a pretty straightforward idea. If you're in a math class and you don't know the answer, I know I wouldn't say an answer. If I'm 100% sure that I don't know what the answer is, I'm not going to come up on camera and microphone and give an answer. So I think kind of apply your life experiences when you're talking about racism or rights for minorities and stuff like that, because I think you'll find that not only are you in a better position, but people are going to be more willing to listen to what you have to say, even if they disagree with you. Because if I come across someone in an Instagram comment that is obviously willing to learn, I'm going to be more likely to respond and try and give them information. Whether or not they change their mind, I can't decide that. But giving them information that's reliable and accurate could be the difference between them not knowing about something, and so I think that kind of goes for, the Black Lives Matter, the sentences and the statements that I have, and pretty much everything else. Educating someone is never a bad thing. And, I made a note on here, and it says sometimes people don't know that what they said was offensive. And so, accusing them of something is not always a good way to go about it. And don't, they could come back and say, well, that's not what I meant. That's not the point. They said something. And whether or not that's how they meant it, you can say in a nice way, it's not what that means, or it doesn't mean what you think it meant, or I took it in a different way. How about next time you say this, and so.
Yeah. I think, wow, you've touched upon so many points. So I was like, okay, where to begin? First of all, I think overarching it to make it, well, it's not a simple topic, to make it a bit simpler, it's a matter of like acknowledgement versus not acknowledging it, right? Right. That's the big overall thing that kind of you were talking about, right? Whether like you don't know it, don't say it, like in math class. Yeah. Personally, I beg to differ, because like, how else are you going to learn in math unless you don't?
No, I know. It was more of a, and I don't mean to interject, it was more of a, sure. Don't push your information or your beliefs on someone if you can't necessarily back them up. I'm not just going to say the sky is red if you can look out the window and see that it's blue.
Right.
The point is, have information, and, don't purposely not acknowledge and receive information that's available to you, especially now. You have right. Google, you have TV, you have anything you could really want, right. And so not having information is not an excuse.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think the next thing that I wanted to like touch upon as well was like, so what if you do have that information though? Like, is it, it's not about right or wrong, but like, do you advocate for in a certain situation to be like, if I do know it and I'm aware of it, do you still say it? Because then again, it's like to not say or to say, because right now, especially with the current state of how fragile the current world topic of it is, it's quite a big thing, and it's going to have a lot of impact no matter what you say, right? Like you right. If you said something, you said it. So to say or not to say?
Yeah. I think, like I said, you can always say to someone nicely, that's not a good thing to say. Just say it like that, I don't think that means what you think it means, and then explain to them what it actually means. And so I think that's an excellent question to say or not to say, obviously Shakespeare. But I think it's kind of one of those things where like, even the information that we're giving on a nonpartisan way of thinking, it can be taken politically. The information that we're giving in a non-affiliated manner can be used to push an agenda for one side or the other. And so I think it never really should, although I admit that it does, come down to political affiliation, because I'm not going to tell someone just because they believe this or believe that they shouldn't be able to access our information or other information, because if they have that information and the ability to access it and are choosing not to, or are choosing to but still believe the way that they do, it's not for me to tell them whether that's right or wrong. And like you said, it's not really a question of right or wrong, because, you know, I believe that I'm right and you believe you're right and everyone else believes that they're right. Otherwise they wouldn't think that way. I mean, I don't know anyone that has a political or economical or whatever you have belief, but they think it's wrong. You know, I mean,
Right.
that just kind of goes against our nature. And so, you know, it does come back to right versus wrong, but there really isn't a right versus wrong, because it depends on the person. And so I think it's a very deep conversation that isn't for today.
Oh
But
yeah. I mean, like, I don't mean to like probe further, but you know how in one of your projects as well for LGBTQ plus, it has like the whole, it's like a dictionary, but like simplified for
yeah,
all of the terms, right? In terms of identity. Now, here's what begs the question for me. You know how like on all our bios, right? Because, you know, 21st century kids, we've
yeah,
got Instagram and Facebook and all those cool bios, you know, and it's become more of a normal thing now ever than before, right? And something that maybe our parents don't like necessarily see eye to eye on. Like my mom was talking to me the other day and was like, Chloe, what's bisexual? Or like, what are all these terms? And she was like, also, because we're seniors, we're going through our Common App. Common App, like 5 years ago, didn't have all of the terms that you can identify yourself as. 20 some terms compared to
yeah,
like
there's a
now,
lot.
like before,
Yeah.
right? Before it's just
Mhm.
like you're female or male. Now,
Right.
understandably, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Now that's a more normal thing now, right? That in your emails, in your bios, that you go, I refer to myself with she slash her, hers pronouns. You might
Mhm.
refer to yourself as they, theirs, and you might refer to yourself as him, his, like it keeps going. Now, regarding ethnicity, is that something that like, you know, you're talking about saying or not saying? Is that something that is going to be normalized? I think like this is more philosophical, I guess, or like just begging the question, is that something that is going to add to that category? Like, do I need to make it clear? Because also it's a matter of acknowledging our differences and accepting that, right? What you were saying, right? And a whole bunch of the conversation was like saying, I don't see color. You're purposefully, or not purposefully, but with that statement, you're completely ignoring everything of their struggles and the differences
Mhm.
in your ethnicity that makes it
Yeah.
harder for them or easier
Right.
for you, and kind of just brushing that over. Now,
Mhm.
by making that clear and saying that, is that something that we need to do or not?
Um, so I think it's a difficult thing, because, you know, we obviously need to acknowledge the struggles that every person experiences, and, you know, mental health to women's issues to over sexualization, you know, whatever it may be. You know, I think it's important to acknowledge that, but it does end up becoming a personal choice on whether you decide to learn about it, educate yourself, and get involved or change your opinion. Because I mean, I've seen people on Instagram particularly, where I've sent information that is credible, you know, from a government source, and they still choose not to see what it is that I'm explaining to them, you know, and I can't make them see something. And so, you know, kind of what I've done on our website with the LGBTQ plus, you know, they're called labels, but it is a choice. You know, you can choose what you want to identify as, you know, it's what you want, you know, he, him, they, them, she, her, you know, it's your choice. And so I think personally, I have my pronouns in my Instagram bio because, you know, and I've started, you know, whenever I'm talking to someone new, they, them, regardless of whether it appears to be a guy or girl, you don't know until you know them. You don't know for sure, and you shouldn't assume until you've clarified. So a simple question like, what are your pronouns, or what pronouns do you prefer, is I like to be asked that, even though, you know, mine conform to society, there are peoples that don't. And it can be very traumatizing for them, whether they admit it or not, to be mischaracterized with pronouns, or, you know, even a name that they prefer to go by. I don't know if that answered your question, but I know we're running low on time. So
No, yeah, I think that was a relevant response. In my head, I'm just like, what a world would be like going like, my name is Chloe. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Chinese. Like, that's my normal thing. Anyway, yeah, as we are, reaching time, I think that's, again, another discussion for another episode. But this is really great. And we had a really great conversation with you, Anthony. Really grateful that you came on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this was a really good discussion, and the main things I think that we should all draw from this is that you just have to be aware, and in order to be aware, you have to educate yourself. But as we move into exiting out, thanks for listening.
Yeah, so thank you guys for listening to Blurred Box with Chloe, Pooja, Sophie, and Andrew.
If you like our show and want to know more, please check us out on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or please leave us a review on iTunes.
And be sure to join us next week for another episode, or in 2 weeks from now, I think, another episode of Blurred Box, and we'll be releasing every other Sunday.
We would love to hear your feedback, suggestions, and questions, which you can email to blurredbox88@gmail.com. And if you want to learn more, you can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at blurredbox for the latest updates. Thanks.
And you can also go find more stuff on Anthony, because you can go find that at worldawarenessassociation.org. Is that right, Anthony? Okay. All right, great. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.